Okay, if that's working. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining and sticking with the Shiur. I hope everybody's had a good week of bracha at least. We still haven't heard all the news that we want to hear from Israel and around the world. So again, we hope that the merit of the learning that we're doing this evening will add to the merit all over the world to bring our hostages home, end the war, bring your refuah, bring a Yeshua, bring a healing to all those who need it, those whose names we know and those whose names we don't know. And again, I would like to dedicate our learning for the time being in memory of my mother-in-law, Adele Meister, Golda Bat Menachem Koppel in Blima, who Shloshim, our family will be observing this Shabbos. It will be 30 days since she passed away. So just a couple of housekeeping points. So next week, we will also have the class at 8 p.m. The shul has a different Zoom link that I'll be mailing out. I don't have it right now. So we will have the class at 8. I didn't really want to change the time. Some of you asked that we keep that, and I agree with you. So we are going to be meeting next Tuesday at 8 p.m. and I will mail out. If you didn't send me your email, can you just, if you haven't, email me after the class, Rabbi Diamon at shomayim.org. So I have your email just in case you weren't at the last class and you're joining tonight. So Rabbi Diamon at shomayim, SHOMAYIM.org. Want to make sure that you have the link. Now, next week we'll be using this second link that week only, and then the week after that we'll be back at this regular link because the shul is going to be changing its mincha mariv time and going to the earlier plug mincha schedule for the spring summer mode. So we really have just this week and next week that we have to sort of navigate this close call with the time. So that's going to happen. And something that I also wanted to announce that I look forward to every year, maybe some of you do as well. Before Pesach, I take this time slot and I dedicate the Shiur not to Parsha, but to Haggadah. And Divrei Torah on the Haggadah, an hour's worth of Divrei Torah on the Haggadah. And that will be the Tuesday night before Pesach. So that's going to be Tuesday, April 16th. And I'm making a special flyer to put in Shabbat Matters, just to remind everybody. And even if people who don't normally come to my Shiur want to join the Haggadah Insights, Divrei Torah for your Seder table Shiur, that's fine. And you can tell people to join. I recommend maybe bring a pencil, bring something to write with, a paper, in case I say something that you think is usable at your Seder. You may want to just jot it down so you can you can have it for your Seder table. Okay, so having said that, let's now transition to our Parsha class. So we are moving through Sefer Vayikra, and today's Parsha is called Parsha Shmini. Now, Parsha Shmini, the name itself is significant. Let's just get a little background on the name. The word Shmini, comes from the Hebrew word Shmona, which means 8. Shmini means 8. And as the Parsha indicates from its very beginning, this Parsha deals with what is considered the 8th day. Okay? So, Vayi Bayom Hashmini, and it was on the 8th day, Kara Moshe la'Aaron u'levanav, that Moshe called to Aaron and his sons, u'leziknei Yisrael, and to the elders of Israel, and he said what's the immediate section that follows. So what's the 8th day? Like what happened to the other 7 days? So just to remind you of something that we talked about, actually not last week, but even at the end of Sefer Shemot. So when the Mishkan was fully created, meaning that all the parts had been properly created, which is what the end of Sefer Shemot tells us about, then, and that, by the way, happened in Kislev. So the Mishkan's completion, meaning the work, was done in the Hebrew month of Kislev. But the actual inauguration and the opening rituals of the Mishkan were delayed. So you might think that they would just start right after the completion. No, it waited for Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, and it was on Rosh Chodesh Nisan that the Mishkan was erected. However, it was at the last 7 days of the Hebrew month of Adar, that Moshe, for each of those 7 days, Moshe assembled and disassembled the parts of the Mishkan. So he assembled them and he disassembled them. So for 7 days, there was this like practice routine that was going on. Every day the Mishkan was going up and going down. Now there's a lot of back and forth amongst the Meforshim as to the extent of which it went up, the extent of which it went down, what is the actual, which part of the Mishkan is called the Mishkan? Were there parts of it that were called the Mishkan, or is the whole thing the Mishkan? Sforno has an interesting idea, others do, but be that as it may, our Parsha begins on the 8th day, meaning the 7 days of rehearsal are now over, and here we go with the 8th day, which, according to what I just told you a moment ago, is the 8th day, which is the first day of the month of Nisan. It's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So let's begin by just considering for a second this whole notion of the 8th day. So if the 8th day is the inaugural day, what would you consider to be the inaugural day's most prominent feature? Well, it sounds like a foolish question. Obviously, the prominent feature is that it's the day in which the Mishkan is inaugurated. But when you call it the 8th day, it somehow has a different feel, correct? Because inaugural is somehow looking forward. You're beginning, this is day one of the realm of the Mishkan. This is day one that the king ascended the throne. This is day one of our new project. This is day one of our new team. But that's not what the Torah calls this Parsha. It introduces it as the 8th day, which means that it's connected to, it's tethered to the 7 days beforehand. So the name of the Parsha somewhat forces us to stop and think, because nothing is random, nothing is coincidental in the Torah. Why would the Torah choose to describe this day as the 8th day of the preparatory process, as opposed to by the name that probably more meaningfully describes the essence of the day, which was day one of the inauguration? So I want to share with you a comment from Rabbi David Feinstein. So you may be familiar with the Feinstein family name. Rav David Feinstein's father was the late Rav Moshe Feinstein of blessed memory, who had an international reputation worldwide as being the Gadol Hador, being just a huge Talmid Chacham, who took upon his shoulders to answer many, many, many difficult and timely halachic questions during his lifetime. He died in the year 1986. Following his death, his son, David Feinstein, assumed the position of the Rosh Yeshiva. The yeshiva was Tiveret Yerushalayim. I'm not a New Yorker, but those of you who are or will have been will know that Tiveret Yerushalayim is in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and that's where Rav Feinstein, Rav Moshe Feinstein lived, and that was where he gave Shiur, and that's where the yeshiva was. And following Rav Moshe Feinstein's passing in 1986, Rav David took over the cloak of leadership, the mantle of leadership of the yeshiva. He himself was also a posek, not of the status of his father, and he wrote books on many halachic issues, as well as commentaries to the Haggadah, which are often worth reading. So I'm going to share with you from his commentary on the Torah called Kol Dodi. I want to explain his answer to the question why the Torah seems to emphasize the aspect of the 8th day of preparation as opposed to the first day of the functioning of the Mishkan. And this is his answer. He says that the Torah, by doing so, wants to teach us what seems obvious, but maybe we don't spend enough time considering this. And that is, and these are his words, that the preparation one makes for doing a mitzvah have nearly as much importance as the mitzvah itself, that they are really part of the mitzvah itself. For example, even though the Seder lasts only a few hours on Pesach evening, it can require weeks of preparation, including learning many laws and customs. One might think it's a waste of time to spend all the time. It's a waste to spend all that time preparing for such a short affair. In reality, however, the preparations are part of the mitzvah, because without them, it would be impossible to do the mitzvah properly. So the preparation it's a holy act. And when we think about what we do in our lives and the time we spent doing the things that we do in our lives, according to this idea, it's important for us to understand and embrace the notion that preparation is also a holy act. It's not just getting the job done. It's the steps we take, the path we follow, the journey we embrace to get to the destination that's also valuable. Jews are not just product-oriented. We're also process-oriented. And Rabbi gives another interesting halakhic example of this. So just imagine it's Sukkot and we're building a sukkah. So we do this once a year. So you all know, of course, that the normal pattern, the normal ritual is the first night of Sukkot, we're all excited. We sit in the sukkah and we make Kiddush. So we make Kiddush to the Kadesh, Yisrael, the Hazmanim. We say a Leishay Basukkah, and we say the bracha of Shehecheyanu. Now, what are we saying the bracha of Shehecheyanu for? Well, we're saying for two things. We're saying the Shehecheyanu because it's a new Yom Tov. Now, we're thanking God who gave us the life that we embrace to celebrate another Yom Tov in our lifetime. But the Shehecheyanu is equally applicable to the fact that we're doing a mitzvah for the first time in a year. We're sitting in a sukkah, and we are fulfilling a mitzvah, and therefore we recite the Shehecheyanu on the Yom Tov and on Sukkah. That's why, by the way, on the second night of Sukkot, we reverse the order. It's Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, that always goes first. Then we say the Shehecheyanu, and then we say Leishay B'Sukkah. Why? Because the second night we've already been in the Sukkah. The Shehecheyanu does not apply to the Sukkah anymore because we said the Shehecheyanu the night before. So since it doesn't apply to the Sukkah anymore, we bump up the Shehecheyanu, and the Shehecheyanu only applies to the Yom Tov and not to the Sukkah. But what's the point I'm making? What's the halachic point here? The halachic point is that when can you say the Shehecheyanu? Normally, we all say it on the first night, as I just said, during Kiddush. But you may or may not know that you are allowed to recite the Shehecheyanu when you finish building the sukkah. Even though you can't perform the mitzvah when you finish, like most of us are not, you have to build the sukkah before Sukkot. You can't build it on Sukkot. So whenever you're finished building the sukkah, by definition, can't be Sukkot. So if it can't be Sukkot, it's not the Yom Tov. And if it's not the Yom Tov, when you are in the sukkah, you're not fulfilling the mitzvah. And yet the halacha says, what? That you can say the Shehecheyanu at the time of your completion. Why? And the answer, hopefully this point is intuitive. Because the act that you just did is all you must build the sukkah to be in the sukkah to fulfill the mitzvah. And so therefore, the act of building the sukkah is part of your experience of the mitzvah. And it's worthy of its own blessing. It's worthy of the blessing to say Hashem's name. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Shehecheyanu. And so according to Rav Feinstein, he says, that's why the Torah calls this Shmini. Because it knows that all of us are going to be excited to read what the inauguration looks like, felt like, smelled like, all the sounds. We're imagining what it must have been like, the pageantry on that Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And yet, as much as all of that's true, it is true, the Torah wants us to take a step back and say, but all the things that led up to it, all the 7 days, in fact, even all the building and all the anxiety and making sure that all those details were taken care of, that too is important. And we must never sort of play down that role of preparation. And think about so many areas in our life where preparation does play a role. And not in our religious life, in our worldly life, we accept this idea, and sometimes when it comes to our religious life, we're less likely to apply it. So just on a simple level, and I've said this before, you bought tickets to a Broadway play or to a play or something, and it's something that you're interested in, so you might have read the play beforehand, you might read the playbill. You're going to look for reviews. You're going to want to see where the best seats are. You want to hear what people say about the play, about the movie, whatever it is. And that's normal behavior. Everybody does that. You walk into the theater and they give you this playbill and you're reading. You want it's about curtains not gone up yet. You're looking, checking. All of those moments are exciting. And they're all lead up to the play. And I want that. And I enjoy it. And I spend time doing it. Okay, so what's the sort of religious equivalent to that? Now, the religious equivalent is that how am I preparing myself for my religious experience? So I know that the difference may be that I don't buy tickets to the theater every day, every week, every month. But the notion that preparing for certain moments or experiencing certain moments may call upon me to be thoughtful and be more prepared, that's not unusual. So going to shul on Shabbos, we go, it's how long is it, whatever long it is, and we're all going to complain. The cousin went on, the rabbi, oh my God, that drasha. What are we doing to make that experience better for us, besides complaining that somebody else didn't make it better for me? I want you to make it better for me, Rabbi. I want the cousin to make it better for me. And what am I doing to make it better for me? What's my preparation? No. That's exactly the point. That sometimes we feel, I guess, disappointed. Maybe we feel that something is missing from those experiences. And so often, it's not because other people didn't step up to the plate. Other people didn't do their jobs properly. It's because we didn't prepare properly. And again, last comment, I often feel very sorry for people who are not regular shul goers, who come to shul once or twice a year, and they pick Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to come. And I know why they're picking it, and I'm giving them credit for it. But of all the days to come to shul, the day where you're going to be in shul for 4.5 hours, the prayers are of more complicated Hebrew, more complicated and sophisticated structure, and they're coming and they're sitting down, and of course it's hard. And of course it's not engaging. And of course it's boring. And part of it is because, nobody got ready for it. Nobody bothered to read anything. Nobody opened up a machzor and said, so what is it we're doing? Like why? Like one idea, two ideas. So it's just a thought about what we might be able to do to enhance our experience of our religious lives. Preparation matters. Okay, let's move on. So at the very beginning of Parsha Shmini, as I said, Moshe begins to talk to Aharon, who and his family play a key role in the inauguration of the Mishkan, keeping in mind, of course, that the Mishkan is going to be essentially the central place of worship, and one of the key families that are going to be involved in the worship rituals, of course, Aharon and his children, and later on Levi'im. So here's the pasuk, Vayomer el Aharon. So Moshe is talking to Aharon, and this is what he says to him. Kach lecha egel ben bakar lechatat, v'ayil leolat mimi, v'hakrev lifnei Hashem. Take for yourself a young bull for a sin offering, chatat, and a ram for an elevation offering. So an ayil is a ram or an olah. So I know this is, I don't mean to be obvious, but it's important. So how many different korbanot did Moshe tell Aharon to prepare? 2, correct? The first one is an egel, a young bull, and the other is a ram for olah. Good. Next verse is pasuk gimel. Paratet pasuk gimel. But el b'nei Yisrael to the barely more. And Moshe says to Aharon, I want you to tell b'nei Yisrael the following: Kechu seir izim lechatat, ve'egel v'cheves b'nei shanat mimim leolah. Reading, and to the children of Israel speak as follows: Take a he-goat, seir izim, for a sin offering, for a chatat, ve'egel v'cheves b'nei shanat mimim leolah, and a calf and a sheep in their first year, unblemished, for an elevation offering. Okay, so I tried to read it slowly enough that you'd be able to catch this. When Moshe was speaking to Aharon, how many different korbanot, or how many different animals did Aharon have to prepare? The answer is 2. And how many animals did Bnei Yisrael have to prepare? And the answer is 3. It's the same category of korban. Aharon had to prepare a chatat, And Bnei Israel had to prepare a chatat. Aharon had to prepare a olah, which was the ram, and Bnei Israel had to prepare a olah. But Bnei Israel's olah was to be of a egel v'cheves, a young, a calf, and a sheep. So, two things about this that I want to just share with you. Number one, why were the sacrifices not equivalent? Why did Aharon bring 2 animals and the Jewish people have to bring 3? Not clear. And the second thing, Moshe is talking to Aharon, and this is what he says to again. Vayomer el Aharon. So Moshe is speaking to Aharon, is giving Aharon instructions what he should do. And then the Torah says, Ve'el b'nei Israel tedaber lemor. Moshe says to Aharon, and I want you to tell the Jewish people what to do. Okay. So what's odd about that? What's odd about that? What's odd about what? Moshe and Aaron are standing there. Moshe turns to Aaron and says, this is what I want you to do. And then I want you to tell Bnei Israel what they should do. Why doesn't Moshe tell Bnei Israel what they should do? He's already teaching. He's teaching Aaron what to do. So why doesn't he just continue and tell the Jewish people, okay, I'm telling Aaron what he should do, now I'm telling you what to do. So why is it that according to the Torah, Moshe turns to Aharon and says, now you tell them, as opposed to Moshe lots of things that Moshe tells the Jewish people throughout the entire Chumash. But right here, he says, no, Aharon, you do it. So let's go over the first question first. I want to share an explanation with you by Rabbi Nissen Alpert, who, by the way, happened to have been also one of the Talmidim Mubakim, one of the outstanding students of Moshe Feinstein's itself. So Nissen Alpert, in his own commentary to the Chumash called Limudei Nisan, has an interesting explanation that I want to share with you. Okay, this is what he says. He says this. He said, why did the Jewish people have to bring more than Moshe brought? And he answers it this way, based on the writings of the rabbis in an explanation of Sefer Vayikra called Torat Kohanim. And this is the language. Yavo Seir Izim v'chaper al Ma'aseh Izim. Yavo Egel v'chaper al Ma'aseh Egel. He says that the choice of animals and the number of animals has to do with what the animals, as it were, represented, historically represented, and what was supposed to be elicited with memory, or what sort of spiritual direction had to be established here. And so this is what the Torah Kohanim says. Moshe is turning to the Jewish people and he says to them, you guys, you have in your hands the responsibility of something you did at the beginning and you did at the end. And because of that, yesh b'yadchem tchila, what did you have in the beginning? You had an act that has changed history. What was that? Sale of Joseph. So what's the connection to the goat and Joseph, the Izim? Anybody remember? Of course you do. What did his brothers do? They faked his death, Joseph's death. Remember how? They took an animal, the Izim, they shechted it, and they took his multicolored coat, they dipped it in, they went back home, showed it to Yaakov, and made Yaakov believe that Yosef was eaten or savagely killed by an animal of some sort, and this is the bloodstained coat, all that's left from Yosef. So according to this explanation, Moshe is talking pretty sharply to the Jewish people and says, you guys, you need to know that that event has not been erased from memory, and not even has been erased from sort of like the spiritual landscape of our past. That still somehow still resides. And, says the Torah Kohanim, and you also have on your hands responsibility that something happened more recently. And what was that more recently? The ego. The ego. So now we understand Seir Izim, and now we understand the choice of calf. These animals are very specifically chosen because they were intended to evoke associations with two moments of history. But what are these two moments of history? It's as though the Torah Kohanim, the Chachamim, want us to see these not just as bookends, which they seem to be suggesting, but there may even be a linkage. There may be something that binds them together. So the obvious thing is, well, they both are two things that transform history. But is there something more than just the fact that they were influential and they had impact on how history and Jewish society developed? Or is there something more intrinsic to what they represented that needs to be thought about? And Rabbi Nielsen Alford, in his commentary, suggests the second, that there's something about these two things, in addition to their serious nature, that's worthy of considering. And this is what he says. Shim kol hachata'im hu geut adam. All sins, these in particular, but truthfully all sins, are the result of what? Human arrogance. Shiro'eh atzmo kikar, v'chulam tfeilim lo. Because we all see ourselves as being the most important person, the most important force in life, and everything else is secondary to us. The Gemara says somewhere that what is sin? Sin is the result of man being overcome by and overwhelmed by, this is the language of the Gemara, ruach shtut. It's some sort of momentary lapse of sanity. It's somehow all the ability that we have to properly think critically and understand why something is wrong to do, and we shouldn't go down this path. For some reason, we get all mixed up. Something crazy overcomes us, overwhelms us, almost like in legal time, like a crime of passion. We get confused, we get overwhelmed, and we make a stupid mistake. And that stupid mistake, why? It's because I can't control myself. That I can't exert the control that I should be exerting over myself. Think about the whole story. What's the story about Joseph and his brothers? The brothers are upset. Why are they upset? Because they thought that they were right. They thought that somehow this little pisher should not be telling them what to do. This 17-year-old nudnik who's bothering them is not important. Who is he compared to us? So according to Rabbi Alper, what was at the core of that whole story was this arrogance that these brothers had, and as a result of this arrogance, that they're filling themselves with their own self-worth, they were able to denigrate a brother and lead them to do things that they should never have done. One Jew should never do this to another Jew. And what's the egel about? The same thing. There's Moshe Rabbeinu. He led them out of Egypt. He did the Esser Makot, a faithful leader, a person who has demonstrated since the time that they encountered him until the moment that he went up top of Har Sinai to bring down the Aseret HaDibrat. He risked his life for them. And in a matter of a few moments, because they miscalculated when he should come down, they thought that their calculations should trump anything else. They filled themselves with such self-worth that obviously they needed to somehow bend reality or the perception so it would justify their reading of what's going on. That, says Nielsen Alford, is yet another example of when we put ourselves at the core. It's interesting. The Torah spends a lot of time talking about avodah zarah, idolatry. So for the modern person, such as we are, and we're obviously thinking, so what is avodah zarah? Avodah zarah is bowing down to statues or bowing down to animals. So we are intelligent. We're smart. So we wonder, so how come are we so much smarter than everybody in the Tanakh? Like, we're smart and they were dumb. Why? Because they bow down to other things. They didn't know that wood is just wood and you can carve out wood. Like, really? They actually thought that? But we would never think that. What lies at avodah zarah? What lies at the core of avodah zarah? What lies at the core of avodah zarah is the willingness to shift the focus of our lives. God should be at the center. And I, according to traditional rabbinic thought, I need to adapt myself to God at the center. But when I don't have God at the center, I have me at the center, I have other things. It's my desire for things to serve me. It's my desire for me to fulfill my own feelings and senses of pleasure for me to fill myself with a sense of pride, for me to say, I don't want you to tell me what to do. I want to tell me what to do. That centered shift from God to something else, that's called avodah zarah. When you deliberately take God out of the center and replace it with something else. So that changes avodah zarah to something what would seem to be primitive and non-intellectual to a very current and a very modern sort of state of being. And I'm not even talking about what's out there about how we change reality to fit what we want and how that's really playing out all over North America and the world. But be that as it may, what Rabbi Nissen Alfred is saying is that's the reason that these animals were chosen. That's the message. That's the depth of what the Torah is trying to say. That when God is creating this ritual, when God is inaugurating the Mishkan, what God is ultimately saying, I think Rabbi Alpert is alluding to, is God is asking us to understand the forces that have affected us because of decisions we have made. And we can change that. We can change that. The Mishkan was intended to be that sort of visual reminder that whatever we started with in the past doesn't have to be the way we go in the future. So think about the past. Think about when we sold Joseph. Think about the Egel. And now let's inaugurate this Mishkan and think about the future. Let's think about the future in a different way. Not with us being in the center, but with Hashem being in the center. It sounds easy. I mean, it sounds easier than I think it actually is to do. Okay, let's continue with Parsha Shmini. So staying again towards the beginning of the Parsha, we're going to get to Pasuk Vav. Oh, I forgot to answer one other question that I raised, and I do want to get to it. Why did Moshe ask Aaron to teach this to the Jewish people? Why did Moshe not step up as the ultimate teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu? And why did he not teach it? And I think that part is also important just to consider. What was Moshe doing by telling Aaron, you teach it? What Moshe was doing was not just inaugurating the Mishkan, but he was, in fact, sending a message as to what the Kohanim and Leviim should be for the Jewish people. And the answer to that is teachers. They were to be the teachers of the Jewish people. And Moshe, as much as he loved being a teacher, I think he was saying something, says, Aaron, this has to be your moment. I need to take a step back. I'm going to tell you the content because that was revealed to me by Hashem. But you need now to be the first, as it were, teacher outside of me to the Jewish people. You need to be that person. And just historically, for everybody's benefit, I know I introduced Parsha Shmini again by reminding everybody of the central role that Kohanim played in the service of the Mishkan and later on the Beit Mikdash. But how long, let me phrase the question differently. Exactly what was the nature of the service that the Kohanim did in the Beit Mikdash in Israel? You know? So every Kohen or his family served for 2 weeks. That's it. For 2 weeks out of the year. For 2 weeks out of the year, a Kohen served in the Beit Mikdash. That's it. Just for 2 weeks. Wait a minute. It's 2 weeks. So what happens for the other 50? For the other 50 weeks of the year, they're back in their hometown. Kohanim didn't live in Yerushalayim. They lived throughout the entire country. And what would they do for 50 other weeks? For 50 other weeks, they would be studying Torah and they would be teaching Torah. They were the ones that were teaching Torah. They would be the role models. They were the ones going and answering questions. They would be the ones who were trying to create an elevated spiritual awareness for the people. They're the ones who are trying to remind everybody, especially if you didn't live near the Beit HaMikdash, you lived in all parts of the country, to sort of maintain that connection. It was a difficult job, and not always one they did well, according to all the stories in the Tanakh. But that was their job, and therefore, according to what we're seeing here, Moshe is turning to Aaron and saying, Moshe is turning to Aaron and saying, Aaron, teach. Now, you teach them. This is it. This is your moment. This is why Hashem created the priesthood, the Kehunah, for you ultimately to be their teacher. And I'm going to say by extension, I'm not a Kohen. And of course, if you're not a Kohen, you don't get to do all the things that technically Kohanim had either the privilege of doing or the responsibility to do. If you were a Kohen living in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, The Jewish farmer had an obligation, as you know, every year, the first crops. They had to tithe certain things. They had to give, truma to the Kohen. Now, you as a farmer could pick whichever Kohen you wanted. So some Kohanim probably got more of these gifts, and some probably got less of these gifts. But those are things that you have to be born a Kohen of a father who's a Kohen. But it is true, and you probably remember this, that the Torah, Hashem, turns to the Jewish people in a moment, I think, of great prophetic challenge as well as inspiration, and says about the Jewish people, you all are a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. You are a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So that can't be understood literally, because not everybody in the Jewish people came from the family of Levi, the Shevet Levi. They were not all descendants of Aaron. So what is it that was intended by this phrase, mamlechet kohanim? There are lots of ways of explaining that. I'm going to share two ideas. One rabbi, I heard Rabbi Jonathan Sachs explain. It's probably true historically, certainly in part of Europe and in non-Jewish Europe, but maybe even parts of Jewish Europe at different ages. Literacy, being able to read, was not always something that everybody was able to do. Certainly within the Christian church, it was the priests who were given the opportunity to read. But the simpletons in a lot of the little towns and villages that populated all Europe, they were illiterate. Except one of the things that's true, I think, of Jewish communal life historically is that Jews were literate. And that kids were taught Aleph Beis. And it was a goal for parents to make sure that their children could read, and that they knew how to daven, and that they could open up a siddur, and that they could open up a chumash and read. So when we're talking about mamlechet kohanim, I remember Rabbi Sachs itself saying that one of the possible interpretations of that is that you should all be a kingdom of priests, and what would categorize priests? Literacy. You must be a group of people that values, cherishes, and promotes literacy. An interesting idea. But the other idea, and I don't think this is less significant, is that if one of the classic responsibilities of Kohanim in the time of the Beit HaMikdash was not just to serve in the temple, because that only took 2 weeks out of 50, but they were to be teachers. So if we call ourselves a mamlechet Kohanim, so that means that all of us have some responsibility. We all have to be teachers in a certain way, not necessarily by profession, but certainly by example. All of us, every one of us, have moments in which people will be looking to us and looking to learn what the right way to follow, what the right path is, what the right action is, what the right thing to say is. And whether they do that when you're shopping in Metro or whether in shul and there's children watching, what will the adults do and how do they do what they do? And where are they going? And why are they there? And not all of those things are moments of education, which in some ways, of course, makes all of us the Kohanim of our generation. Not the real priests, but the educators. Everybody can be a role model. And in that sense, maybe that's the broader sense of Mamlechet Kohanim, the Goy Kadosh. So skipping now, or turning to, staying with Perek Tet and moving to Pasuk Vav. Vayomer Moshe. Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem ta'asu, ve'yera aleichem kavod Hashem. And Moshe said, this is the thing that Hashem has commanded you to do. Then the glory of Hashem will appear to you. Wow. Imagine somebody said to you, you do this and Hashem will appear to you. Okay, just tell me what it is. I want this so much. I want to see Hashem. So I would expect that the following verses would be an elucidation of this thing. But interestingly enough, that's not the case. It remains really obscure what Moshe Rabbeinu is referring to in this pasuk. Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem tasu. This is the matter, or this is the thing that Hashem has commanded you. But it doesn't really say what it is that you should be doing. So that's obviously a topic for discussion. And that's why if you take a look at a whole bunch of rabbinic writing on this section, they have some very, very interesting explanations, and I want to share just a couple with you at this time on this Tuesday night. So, I want to tell you an explanation of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. So, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, whose name I mentioned before, lived in the 1800s in Germany. He was one of the founders of what's called the Neo-Orthodoxy movement. He took upon himself the responsibility to counter a lot of the claims of the Reform Jews, which was a movement that was growing at the time. And they claimed that Judaism was really just a religion of a collection of superstitious ideas, had no thought or rational reason behind it. The world had still been very, very taken by the growth and the spread of the Enlightenment. And so they, in Germany, this was the seat of the growth of the Reform movement itself, feeling this was an enlightened version of Judaism, in an attempt to get away from what they believed is just this vast collection of superstitious ideas. So Raphael Hirsch, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, in his Parish and Chumash, which by the way is written in German, and whichever sets you by in English are all translations of the original. He suggests the following. Shimshon Hirsch suggests that Moshe is revealing to his people, to Bnei Israel, the symbolic meaning that underlies the sacrifices. So we've got a lot of discussion, the sacrifice, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, this is it. This is what I want you to understand. What's the understanding? Well, sacrifices involved the burning mostly of animal flesh as a religious service. Clearly, absolutely. So it was an act, just to be a little bit more graphic, of taking an animal, killing the animal, shechting the animal in a prescribed manner, putting it on the fire so that the fire would consume the animal. And according to Hirsch, that's a symbol of what? Consumption, of burning out. The fire that, as it were, rid the person, not physically, but metaphorically, spiritually, of tendencies that might be more animalistic in nature, and maybe even more sensual in nature. So Hirsch is saying that the point that the Torah is trying to make about this whole cult, that's not the right word, service, this whole portion of korbanot, according to what Hirsch is saying, Moshe is reminding Bnei Israel that the goal of korbanot is to sort of appreciate the presence of Hashem and that he may appear to you. And they had to understand that in order for that to happen, there needed to be a triumph of what? Of spirit over physical. We are physical creatures. We know that. And very often we have these sort of conflicts and bouts of uncertainty where the things that more associate with our physical lives overwhelm our spiritual nature. And we do things that maybe we shouldn't be. Or we go places that maybe we shouldn't because we don't have the strength, or we think we don't have the strength. And Hirsch is saying that's precisely the image of what a korban is. Burn it out. Burn out those tendencies that lead you astray. Understand that you can. Have the koyach to do the things that you need to do. That's Hirsch. But there's other explanation that I want to share with you as well. And that is two more explanations. One is that of Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, the Netziv, the last Rosh Yeshiva of the Volozhin Yeshiva in Lithuania. He closed the yeshiva because he refused to acquiesce to the demands of the Russian government to introduce general studies curricula into the traditional yeshiva in Lithuania. And he said, that's it. The minute that we let the government tell us what we can study, then we've already begun to see the end, and he preferred not to have the yeshiva function. Last Rosh Yeshiva. His commentary to the Torah is called Hamikdavar, and in it, he says, again, like Hirsch, that this is a metaphor. But what's the metaphor about? The metaphor is that korbanot are highly prescribed. So what's the point there? You can't do whatever you want. Our search for closeness to God, our search to yearn, to somehow become that whole person, our search to connect to God is a genuine search, and it's a search that we should embrace and encourage. But in that search, we have to understand that God himself says, this is the way I want you to get close to me. I'm going to prescribe the ritual. This is how I want you to do it. Yes, but God, I'm so overwhelmed by my love. I just want to break out and do my own thing. I have a way that I think I can get closer to you if I could sort of like not go this way, go that way. I think it's going to have a deeper impact. And that's Eva saying, that's precisely what Hashem says. I don't want that. I don't want that. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't want that level of individualism. I want some sort of standardized experience that brings people together. If Hashem were to say, you pick your path and you pick your path, so there's Diamondism and there will be other isms, and everybody would find their own path, so there's no standard experience. If there's no standard experience, we don't have a collective experience. We don't have a collective experience. What does religion mean? It means everybody's doing their own spiritual thing, but there's nothing that binds us together. And according to the Tzvi, that is precisely the point. And korbanot, because they are so highly prescribed, the message contained therein is exactly that there's a limit, that there is a pathway. I mean, we just think about it a little bit in human terms. Imagine that you are beginning a meaningful relationship with somebody and you are prepared to commit your life to this person. But this person said to you, these are the things that are important to me. And you say, I appreciate that, but I think I know better how for us to develop a relationship. And you go ahead and disregard the things that are important to the other person. So what does that mean? Because you want to develop that relationship this way, and they don't. And they tell you that they don't. And you say, but I know better than you, and I think it's the way we should do it. Well, sort of like that's a simplistic form of the same sort of point that Natsiv is making, is if Hashem is telling you, this is how I want you to develop a relationship with me, and we go ahead and say, yeah, but that's not what we want to develop with you. We want to do it another way. So Hashem says, but that's not what I want. So if you want to do it with somebody else. Don't do it with me. This is not what I want. So that's a simplistic way I understand, but it may be a helpful way. The final idea is Rabbi Aaron Levin, or Lewin. It's hard to know how to pronounce his name. He's the author of a Parsha on Chumash called Adrash Ve'Ha'iyun. I quoted him before. And he says the following, that what the Torah is trying to do, and Chazal are trying to explain, is that each of us has a Yetzer Hara. We all know what that means. It's the evil inclination. But what's the evil inclination trying to get us to do? So unlike what I think Hirsch and Natsiv is saying, the evil inclination here, Lewin suggests, has an interesting chap to it. And here's the way he presents it. When people successfully reach a religious milestone, it's a great moment, isn't it? I did it. I accomplished something. And you feel good. You feel proud. You feel that you're worthy of admiration, respect. You have a sense of, hey, I deserve some credit. And so when a person performs an exceptionally good deed, perhaps, or completes a unit of study, hey, I made a siyum on this, I did a siyum on that, there's a risk. What's the risk according to 11? The risk is you're allowing sort of this sense of gratification and pride to become excessive. And in the excessiveness, there is a danger. So especially at times of celebration and moments, I guess, of climactic accomplishment, we have to remember in that moment of festivity that there's still lots of things that remain to be accomplished and how far we still have to go to reach a higher goal, our ultimate goal. And so at this moment, when the process of the Mishkan's construction is about to be completed, and everybody is going to be, yeah, we did it. Moshe reminds them, wait. What I want you to remember is to eliminate the Yetzer Hara at this moment. And it's a sharp comment. You'll think, what? Why are Jews always such downers? Like, why can't we just have a good time? Let's drink a l'chaim. Come on. But that's the point that Moshe is trying to make here, according to Rabbi Lewin, is that he's worried that sometimes we can get carried away and not necessarily remember how to draw the appropriate boundaries. Okay. Let's go on a little bit more. I'm going to skip now to moving still in chapter 9. I'm going to move to Pasuk Chav Gimel. So Chav Gimel comes to the end, and it says following. So there's all of this ritual that's going on involving Moshe, involving Aaron, his children. ויבוא משה ואהרון אל המועד ויצאו ויברכו את העם ויברך כבוד השם אל כל העם. Reading from the stone, Moshe and Aharon came to the tent of meeting, and they went out, and they blessed the people, and the glory of Hashem appeared to the entire people. Beautiful pasuk. Wow. If only we could have been there. So I want to read to you Rashi. So it says that they came out of the tent, but it's not so clear why they went into the tent. I understand that they left. So Rashi says, Lama nichnasu. So what was the purpose of them entering it? If you're telling me they left, obviously they had entered for a specific purpose. And so Rashi tells us, Lilamdo al Maseh HaKetoret. Then Moshe and Aharon went in because Moshe wanted to teach Aharon inside the Ohel. He wanted to teach him about how to do the Ketoret sacrifice each day. The Ketoret is the incense. So if you remember, we had talked about last week, I think the week before as well, that there were two altars. There was a big, big altar that was outside. That was either called Mizbach HaNechoshet, Mizbach HaOlah, Mizbach HaDama. That's where they had all the animal sacrifices. It was a big area, an empty area that was filled with dirt, and that's why it was called Mizbach HaDama. But inside the compound of the Mishkan, this was on the outside, they had a much, much smaller Mizbeach, which was made out of solid gold. And that was Mizbach HaKetoret, and it was on that the incense had to be offered every day, of course, in a prescribed manner. So Moshe and Aharon go into the Oel Moed, and according to Rashi, according to the Gemara, they went inside because Moshe wanted to instruct Aharon how to bring the Ketoret, this incense. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef Nehemiah Kornitzer was the rabbi in Krakow before the war. Rabbi Yosef Nehemiah Kornitzer. And he also wrote a collection of ideas and Pirush on the Chumash. And in his collection, he offers a really lovely idea about what was significant about this moment of Moshe and Aharon being inside with Moshe teaching Aharon the Ketoret. What's the Ketoret? And why was it important for Moshe to make sure that Aharon knew about it? Well, it was important for him to know how to do everything specifically. But if we're going to take a moment, if the Torah and Chazal want us to know that there was a specific instruction about the Ketoret, and Moshe needed to make sure, then we got to stop and think, okay, what is it about the Ketoret that we need to remember? So one of the things about the Ketoret is the combination of spices that was used to create this incense. And one of the things that was included in the Ketoret is the chelbana, which, according to the Gemara, smelled absolutely terrible. It had a really, really unpleasant odor. But without the chelbana being included in this spice package in the Ketoret was puzzled. So Moshe apparently wanted to be absolutely clear and teach Aharon that he needed to properly construct and bring all the spices in the right measurements, and one of them had to be the chelbana, the wine. Here's the lovely message. The message was, even that which doesn't smell good has to have its place. Has to. And if you eliminate it, and this whole concoction that you may think is beautiful, it's not. It's deficient. It's missing. So those things which are malodorous, those things, I don't want them. And I'm not talking about things here, really. I'm really talking about what they represent. They're representing those members of our community who, when you take a look at them, you say, they don't add anything. They don't add anything to our people. Really, they don't. They don't believe, they don't behave, they don't reflect. They're the chelbana of our community. They're the malodorous ones. They're the ones that give us a bad thing. You know, like, there's the ones that always are going to be the stereotypes that people will maybe make fun of. Or they're the ones who just never do enough mitzvahs. Or they're the ones who never go to shul. Or they're the ones who never do, and we can just add on sentence after sentence after sentence. And yet, it was absolutely required with the Ketoret Korban brought every single day on the gold Mizbeach, that there had to be Chelbana. And what was absolutely necessary for Moshe to teach Aaron is that Aaron, you need to be the person that makes sure that the Chelbana is part of the Korban. And what does that mean? It means more than anybody, Aaron, you need to show love for the Jewish people, which Aaron embraced so much because we have so many rabbinic statements that say what? That was exactly his life. Rodev Ohev Shalom and Rodev Shalom. He loved Jews, and he always tried to make peace between Jews. He accepted people. It was hurtful to him, yes, and it was at his hands that the Egel HaZahav came to be, but it was at his hands because he loved the Jewish people enough to sort of step in and try to delay them from doing something even worse, upon which, of course, he had a big price to pay. We all did. But it came out of a place for the love of the Jewish people. And I don't know if there's anybody who's a Kohen who's watching tonight, who's married to a Kohen, who's a daughter of a Kohen. But just to remind you, when we're in shul, and we're lucky enough to have Birkat Kohanim, of course, the Sfardim do Birkat Kohanim on a daily basis, both in Israel and out of Israel. We who are Ashkenazim only do it on Yom Tov, out of Israel. But just to remind everybody what's done is all the Kohanim are standing in front of the Aron Kodesh. They're all facing the Aron Kodesh. The talus is over their heads. Their hands are spread out like this. And then they begin the bracha. Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'varech amo Yisrael. You, God, who have commanded us, the Kohanim, to bless his people Israel. I don't know if anybody knows the last word in the bracha. You know what the last word in the bracha is? Ve'ahava. You, God, you've commanded us to bless your people Israel. Ve'ahava, with love. Where did that come from? It came from Moshe teaching Aaron. When he took him into the Olam Moed, he said, here's the Mizbeach, here's the spices, but make sure you bring the Chelbana, because you have to love all Jews. And so therefore, Adayom Hazeh, to this day, when Kohanim get up to say Birkat Kohanim, they have to say the bracha, and the bracha concludes with Be'ahava, because they become the primary example of Ketolet, that every Jew should have a place in our community. That Jews need to find ways to connect to other Jews. No, we need to find ways of expressing love to all Jews. Let me end. I know there's only a few minutes left, but I want to just address for a couple minutes one important part of Parshat Shmini, and that's kashrut. One of the important parts of Parshat Shmini, it's one of the two places in Torah, Parshat Shmini and Parshat Re'eh, which the Torah tells us about the classic signs of kosher animals. The animal, the signs of the split hoofs and the regurgitation, ma'alei gerah for animals, fins and scales for fish, for birds, the list of birds which are kosher, the list of birds which are treif, the fact that we're not allowed to eat any of the ramosim, the shkatim, no insects, no reptiles, none of those things are kosher. So we have this whole section of kashrut. So it's an interesting insertion in Parsha, because at the very beginning, Parshat Shmini, as we mentioned, it's the day of inaugurating the Mishkan. So the Mishkan is laying, as it were, carefully packed since Kislev. It's now the first day of Rosh Chodesh, and everybody, of course, the pageantry, the excitement, everybody's there. They know what the Mishkan is supposed to do. The Mishkan is supposed to be that place that sort of symbolizes God has forgiven everybody. We're creating a new relationship. We're taking a step forward. That all these sort of break and rupture that took place beforehand, the Chiyur Yosef we talked about, but more recently, of course, the Egel HaZahav, the fear that God would no longer want to be with us, that fear is gone. This is an amazing day. The future is bright, and we expect Parshat Shmini to talk about things that have to do with the Mishkan, to talk about things that demonstrate how the Mishkan solidifies our relationship to the Almighty. And then smack in the middle, the Torah talks about kosher birds and animals, and like, what is that? Like, what? It's the wrong place. It doesn't seem to be the right theme. Like, I get why we need to talk about it, but nothing is random. And so why is it inserted here? So I just want to share a couple of ideas with you on this one tonight. So what is this kashrut thing here? Like, what's its purpose? And there's more than one answer to this. This Forno tries to answer this, and in what seems to be an unusually long explanation. Most of these explanations of this Forno are very terse and short, but here he goes on, I think, a lot longer, and he suggests a lot of references to history from the time of Avram Avinu, which we're not going to talk about. But he believes, he suggests that this whole section of kashrut is deliberately inserted here because its message belongs right here. Because what's the purpose of the Mishkan? The purpose of the Mishkan is to elevate us. The purpose of the Mishkan is to give us the feeling that we can be better. So why tell me about animals? And why tell me about fish? And why tell me about the birds I can eat? Why tell me about grasshoppers and other sort of things that I can't eat? What does that have to do? Because according to Seforno, this topic of kashrut needs to be understood in the context of the whole Mishkan, which is what? Elevation. That this list of foods should not seem just to be about diet. It's way more than diet. Way, way more than diet. It's about our demonstrating to God that we want to be in a relationship with Him. And He wants to be in a relationship with us. So number one, if Hashem says, these things are important to me, I may not understand why, but if I want to be in a relationship with you, I'm going to do it. If I'm going out with a girl and I'm dating, if Rochelle and I, then if she says to me, or I say to somebody, these are the things that are important to me, if I want to develop a relationship, I got to take that into account. I can't say forget it, or I walk away because I'm not doing that, but I want to do that, even if I don't understand it, because I want to be with you so much that I'm willing to do things that I may not even be able to logically articulate, but my connection, my yearning is so strong. And this elevates us. If this is part of what it takes to be part of that relationship, I want it. I want it. And if I can't explain it, because I can't explain love, I can't. But I know I want this badly. That's the first idea. The second idea is the whole point of kashrut is distinction and separation. This is yes, this is no. And that's how we lead our lives. We make critical choices at every step. And part of that critical choice involves our separating ourselves from the things that we need to be separate from. And nothing says it better than food, because you always are encountering food, always. Not every situation that's discussed in the Chumash is one that I'm going to encounter on a regular basis. There's a lot of mitzvahs that I get to do if this happens, or should I be there. But food is everywhere, every day, every place, all over the world. The act of eating is something that is natural, and therefore, if I imbue the natural with a sense of holiness, I'm elevating myself, which is exactly the purpose of the Mishkan. The Mishkan was that symbol that reminded me I can be better, I can do better, I can go higher, I can develop this relationship. And everywhere I am, every moment I'm eating, can I or not, can I have this or not, I'm sort of taking a second to think about that. And every time I make a critical choice about this is what Hashem wants, this is not what He wants, I'm making a statement about my relationship, and I'm elevating myself and making myself draw closer to God. And the other thing about it that I want to say is, you don't have to be a scholar. Meaning, so I know the basic rules of kashrut. So even Arayom Azam, so I'm going shopping, I'm looking for the MK, I'm looking at the COR, I'm looking at the OU. I know how to look for a kosher symbol. I know which vegetables are going to be okay. I know which vegetables have more, but I don't have to be a scholar. Meaning that the element of drawing closer to God can be observed by just the physical activity of eating. What I eat and what I don't eat. And it can be in the hands of everyone. Age is not a factor. Schooling is not a factor. Scholarship is not a factor. And even past piety isn't a factor. That in some ways, the rules of kashrut, if followed, allow me to accomplish something that Hashem says is very dear to me. On the day of the establishment of the Mishkan, which the Chachamim say in some ways it even has the same greatness of the day God Hashem created the world, the 7 days of creation. 7 days of creation, 7 days of Miluim, followed by the 8th day. There is a parallel there that the Mishkan somehow was on that same level. Oh my gosh. Then my engaging in this part of it is something so doable. And Hashem says, yes, that's my message to you. The drawing near to me is not some obscure and faraway idea that you have to either spend 40 years in the desert or you have to spend 10 hours a day studying. Of course, it has an impact studying, but there are aspects to this that are attainable by everybody. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and reactions. A reminder again, next week I will be sending out a new Zoom link just for next week. After that, it's back to this. If you have not sent me your email, then shoot me an email after the shiur at Rabbi Diamon at shomayim.org, SHOMAYIM.org. And I'll make sure that I will send you the link, and that'll be just for next week's use. The week after that, we're back to the regular link. And a reminder again that on April the 16th, our shiur is going to be on Haggadah Insights, Divrei Torah for your Seder table. And so if you want to make sure you have something to write down, if I say something that you really want to make sure you repeat, then do so. And I'm hoping actually that you're going to do that on every Shabbos, that something that I've said today may trigger a thought or resonate, and you'll share that with other people at your Shabbos table or over Shabbos. So I am going to just change the view here for everybody. And happy to, I have to get to Mariv at 9:30, so we have a little bit of time, and then I have to zip out to make sure I get to Mariv.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question.
Hi, Charlie. Yeah.
Hi. Now, at the beginning of the Parsha, it says that Aaron should speak to Bnei Yisrael, right? Now, who exactly is Bnei Yisrael? Like, are we talking communal or are we talking individual?
I want to be clear what you're asking.
I want to know who needs to bring the sacrifices.
Well, he's teaching all of the Jewish people, not at necessarily one moment, but he needs to make sure that they all learn this portion. So if you're asking who amongst the people need to know this, they all need to know this, because there may be points in their life that they need to bring this korban, or points that's not. But in order to make sure he does that, the question is methodological. So how do you teach 2 million people? So the Gemara Masechet Eruvin, and Rashi quotes this at the little bit in the beginning of Parsha Kedoshim, suggests that the classic system that Moshe Rabbeinu used to teach Torah to the Jewish people was as follows. Once Hashem taught Moshe whatever topic he needed to teach him, then Moshe invited Aharon into the Ohel Moed, and he taught Aharon the whole thing. After he finished, Aharon sat down. Then he invited Aharon's sons to come in, and then Moshe repeated exactly what he told Aharon to Aharon's sons. And then he invited the Zakanim to come in, and then he repeated it again. So that means Aharon now has heard it 3 times, and Aharon's sons have heard it twice, and the Zakanim have heard it once. And then he began to call in various groups of the Jewish people. And then the other groups also began to teach various parts of Bnei Israel. So while the Pasuk says, teach Bnei Israel, what the Pasuk doesn't tell us is actually how does that get accomplished? So it gets accomplished not all at once, it gets accomplished over a period of time. And one of the things you've seen in the way the Torah is written, in many sections, most sections, is you don't get a sense of how much time lapses between story 1 and story 2, unless it's explicitly mentioned or that there are sort of hints in the text. But that's how it's done. So when you ask who are Bnei Israel, it means all the people. In this case, I don't think it means the children. I think it means the adults. But that would be the way he did it, and he didn't do it like, all at once, because that.
Rabbi,
Hello.
I appreciate what you said, except here it says you shall take, right? Speaking to Aaron, you shall take an egel and an ayil. And speaking to the Bnei Yisrael, tell them to take a
Okay,
either
and the noise that I can
to
hear.
take, yes, to take. So who's doing the taking?
So that doesn't mean that every single Jew needed to do this. So even example later on at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, there are communal sacrifices that are brought on a daily basis that were brought by quote unquote the Jewish people. What does that mean by the Jewish people? It's not brought by hundreds and thousands of people, but when people used to contribute the Machzit HaShekel, which they collected every Rosh Chodesh Adar, then that money, which came from all the people, was used to buy the Korban. And so when the Korban that represented the community would be brought by the Kohanim, they would be the ones doing the actual quote unquote killing and sacrificing. But because the animal was bought with money that came from the people, it was as though the people were doing it. Meaning that we have a notion in Jewish law called agency. In Hebrew, it's called shlichut. That I can appoint you, Charlie, as a shaliach for me to do something. And when you do that thing for me, who gets credit for it? I do. And I didn't do it. But Charlie was my shaliach. He was my agent. And so there can be a one-to-one agency. You could be my shaliach, Charlie. But you could also be the shaliach of a group of people who say, Charlie, we want you to do this for us. And so Charlie does that for all of us. And then who do we get credit for it? Yes. How? Because Charlie was our shaliach. So that's the same notion that went on in the Mishkan and the Beit HaMikdash later on. That the Kohanim became the shlichim of the entire Jewish people, because the entire Jewish people was not at the Beit HaMikdash every single day. My friends, I'm sorry, maybe some of you have questions, but I need to get to marriage shortly. I'm saying Kaddish for my mother-in-law, so I don't want to miss that. I want to thank you again, as I always do. You have no idea how much I enjoy having the opportunity to share Divrei Torah. And I know it may not be as interactive as some of you would like, so I appreciate your patience and your foregoing the interactive quality. That's not the way I normally like to teach, but in order to do the stuff I do and share as much Torah as I do, I've limited the interaction, and I hope you're not too disappointed. Maybe one day we can, do more face to face. I know some of you are not even in Toronto, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you zooming in. So the Zoom platform makes this so much more possible. Like Jemmy and Neil, you couldn't be here. You're in Calgary, or Marty, you're sitting in New York, or even some of you, Eva in Montreal, or some of you are just at home and you can't get out of the house because you can't get out of the house. So that's it. So there you go. I really appreciate it. I want to wish everybody a week of bracha. May Hashem send a Yeshua to all of the hostages. May the next time we meet, God willing, may it be a week where we witness more miracles. We see the release of the hostages, the return of the hostages in a state of wholeness.
Amen.
And those who need a refuah, Yeshua should get them. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.